She stood frozen in the middle of the supermarket aisle, one hand gripping a pack of diapers, the other pressed against her chest as if it could calm the panic rising inside her. The baby in the stroller whimpered softly, unaware that a single number glowing red on a small payment screen had just decided their night. Around her, carts rolled past, conversations continued, and life moved on, indifferent to the quiet humiliation unfolding in that narrow aisle. After a long breath, she turned back toward the shelf, her shoulders sinking as if the weight of the world had suddenly doubled. No one noticed at first. Or maybe they did and chose not to care. She slid the diapers back into place, carefully aligning them as though respect could be restored through neatness. Her fingers trembled, not from weakness, but from the effort of holding herself together. She whispered an apology to no one in particular, swallowed the lump in her throat, and pushed the stroller forward, pretending the sound of her baby's hunger wasn't echoing in her mind. What she didn't know was that a pair of eyes had been watching from the end of the aisle, eyes trained to read markets, risks, and opportunities, but unprepared for this moment. The man didn't recognize her. He didn't know her name, her story, or how many nights she'd gone to sleep calculating what she could sacrifice next. Yet something about the way she walked away, head high, eyes glassy, dignity barely intact, stopped him cold. In a world driven by numbers, returns, and leverage, this was a different kind of transaction unfolding before him. And in the seconds that followed, a single choice would ripple far beyond that grocery store, igniting a chain of events no algorithm could have predicted, and no one would ever forget. She left the store that night with lighter bags than she had planned and a heavier heart than she wanted to admit. The city lights blurred as she pushed the stroller across the parking lot, telling herself the same lie she'd been repeating for months, that tomorrow would be easier. Somewhere between unpaid bills, sleepless nights, and the quiet shame of asking for help, her life had shrunk into a series of small calculations, gas or groceries, rent or medicine, hope or realism. She wasn't looking for sympathy, and she certainly wasn't expecting kindness from a stranger. But what she didn't know was that her quiet struggle had intersected with someone whose world operated on a completely different scale, a man accustomed to moving millions with a signature, yet about to face the most human decision of his life. Stories like this don't begin with miracles. They begin with moments so ordinary they're almost invisible. And that's what makes what comes next so powerful. Because this isn't just about a mother, or an investor, or a viral moment on the internet, it's about how a single decision, made in silence, can expose the cracks in a system and the compassion still hiding within it. So if you believe that real stories can still surprise you, that empathy can come from the most unexpected places, and that small choices can change lives forever, make sure you subscribe now. You won't want to miss how this moment unfolds, or the consequences no one saw coming. The morning after the supermarket incident began like most others for her, too early, too quiet, and already exhausting. She woke up before the alarm, listening to her baby's uneven breathing, mentally reviewing the day ahead. The fridge was nearly empty, her phone showed 3 missed calls from unknown numbers, and the anxiety sat heavy in her chest before her feet even touched the floor. She moved carefully through the small apartment, trying not to wake the baby too soon. Diapers were down to the last few, folded neatly as if order could replace security. She brewed weak coffee, staring at the cracked countertop, reminding herself that she had survived worse. At least that's what she told herself every morning. Across town, the man from the supermarket sat in the back of a black car, scrolling through reports and emails. His schedule was packed with meetings, numbers, and negotiations that could shift markets by lunchtime. Yet his mind kept drifting back to an image that didn't belong in spreadsheets, a woman returning diapers to a shelf, jaw clenched, pride bruised but unbroken. The memory hit him harder than he expected. He remembered the exact way her hands shook, how she avoided eye contact, how she still tried to straighten the box before letting go. It unsettled him in a way no financial loss ever had. For the first time in years, he questioned whether success had slowly insulated him from reality, or whether he had chosen not to see it. Back in her apartment, the baby began to cry. She scooped him up, whispering reassurances she wasn't sure she believed. She calculated again, silently, 2 days until her paycheck, 1 more overdue notice, 0 margin for error. She loved her child fiercely, but love didn't stretch far enough to cover the gaps. By midday, she pushed the stroller toward a local community center, hoping for donated supplies. The walk felt longer than usual, each step reminding her how thin the line was between coping and collapsing. She avoided mirrors, avoided eye contact, avoided the thought of going back to that same store. Meanwhile, the investor canceled a lunch meeting without explanation. He asked his assistant for the name of the supermarket chain, then hesitated before giving further instructions. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, only that ignoring the moment felt wrong, and acting felt risky in a way he couldn't quantify. At the community center, she was told supplies were limited. She nodded politely, masking the disappointment with practiced grace. Outside, she sat on a bench, rocking the stroller gently, fighting tears that threatened to undo her. She didn't know how much longer she could keep pretending everything was under control. That same afternoon, a single message was drafted but not sent. A decision hovered, heavy and unresolved, waiting for the right push. Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives were already moving toward a collision, one that would soon escape the privacy of their worlds and spill into the public eye. The second night after the supermarket passed with almost no sleep. The baby woke every few hours, restless and uncomfortable, and she moved through the darkness on instinct alone. Each cry felt louder than the last, amplified by her fear that the neighbors would complain, that someone would notice how close she was to breaking. By morning, she bundled herself and the baby into worn jackets and headed out again. Pride had already been swallowed once. She told herself it could survive another time. She planned her route carefully, avoiding places where she might run into someone she knew, rehearsing polite smiles and short answers just in case. Across the city, the investor sat in his office staring at a paused security video on his tablet. He had requested the footage under the guise of loss prevention research, a lie that felt thin even to him. The screen showed the aisle, the shelves, the woman, frozen in the exact moment before she returned the diapers. The pause button clicked off, and the video played. Watching it again, knowing her face would never know who was observing, tightened something in his chest. He saw her hesitate, saw her shoulders slump, saw the quiet defeat settle in. It wasn't dramatic. That was what made it unbearable. No one stepped in. No one said a word. And he realized, with sudden clarity, that he had been one of the few who could have. She reached the community center just as the doors opened. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and tired hope. Volunteers smiled kindly, but their answers were familiar. Limited stock. First come first served, come back next week. She thanked them anyway, her voice steady even as her hands shook. Outside, she sat on the curb, staring at her phone. A notification flashed, overdraft warning. She closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against the cool metal of the stroller. For the first time since becoming a mother, a terrifying thought crossed her mind. What if love wasn't enough? In his office, the investor pushed his chair back and stood at the window. He had built his reputation on bold decisions, on seeing value where others didn't. Yet this felt different. This wasn't an investment pitch or a calculated risk. This was raw, human need, and no spreadsheet could justify acting on it. He called his assistant and asked an unusual question. What would it take to help someone without turning it into a spectacle? The silence on the other end of the line told him there was no easy answer. Help, he knew, often came with strings, attention, judgment, expectations. That evening, she returned home with empty hands again. She fed her baby what little she had, humming softly, fighting the urge to cry. The walls of the apartment felt closer now, as if listening. She told herself tomorrow would be different, because she had no other choice. Late that night, a single email was sent, brief, cautious, and irreversible. By morning, the line between private compassion and public consequence would begin to blur, setting off a chain of events neither of them could stop. The email arrived just after sunrise, buried between spam and overdue reminders. She almost deleted it without opening, assuming it was another automated notice or false promise. Something, maybe instinct, maybe exhaustion, made her pause and tap the screen instead. The message was brief, written in careful language. It didn't mention the supermarket or the diapers. It simply said that someone had seen her struggle and wanted to help, no conditions attached. A phone number was included, along with an assurance that she could ignore it if she chose. Her first reaction was suspicion, followed quickly by fear. Help, when offered too easily, often came at a price. She read the email 3 times, her heart pounding harder with each line. Who had seen her? How? The idea that her most vulnerable moment hadn't been as invisible as she thought made her stomach twist. She closed the email, then opened it again, torn between pride and desperation. The baby began to cry, sharp and insistent. She reached for him, whispering apologies through clenched teeth. Tears finally spilled, hot and unstoppable. For the first time, she let herself sit on the edge of the bed and cry openly, grief and relief crashing together in a way she couldn't control. Across the city, the investor waited for a response he told himself he didn't expect. He reviewed documents, signed approvals, spoke in meetings, but his attention fractured constantly. Every time his phone buzzed, his pulse quickened. He wondered if he had crossed a line, or if doing nothing would have been the greater mistake. By midday, she dialed the number and hung up before it rang. She tried again, this time letting it connect. Her voice shook as she spoke, guarded and cautious, ready to end the call at the first hint of judgment. The man on the other end spoke calmly, respectfully, never once asking her to explain herself. He told her he wasn't interested in publicity, that he had no intention of filming, posting, or turning her life into content. He said he had a foundation that helped families in transition, and that her name had come across his desk for review. It was a half-truth, crafted to protect both of them. Silence stretched between them. She searched for the catch, the fine print, the moment where the kindness would collapse. When it didn't, something inside her cracked open, not fully, but enough to let hope slip through. They agreed to meet the following day at a neutral location, public and safe. When the call ended, she sat very still, staring at the wall. Nothing in her circumstances had changed yet, but for the first time in weeks, the future felt uncertain in a way that wasn't purely terrifying. Elsewhere, the investor closed his office door and exhaled deeply. The decision was no longer theoretical. Tomorrow, two worlds that were never meant to touch would meet face to face, and whatever happened next would be impossible to undo. They met in a small cafe just off a busy street, the kind of place where no one paid attention for long. She arrived early, choosing a table near the window so she could leave quickly if she needed to. Her baby slept in the stroller, blissfully unaware of how much rested on this moment. When the man walked in, she recognized him instantly, not from fame, but from the way he carried himself. Calm, deliberate, slightly out of place among chipped mugs and worn chairs. He didn't introduce himself by title, didn't mention his career, and didn't offer a rehearsed speech. He simply asked how she was holding up. At first, she answered carefully. Short sentences, neutral words. Years of survival had taught her that honesty could be dangerous. He listened without interrupting, his attention fully on her, not his phone, not the room. That alone felt unfamiliar. Then, slowly, something shifted. She talked about nights without sleep, about calculations that never worked, about the fear of failing the one person who depended entirely on her. Her voice broke when she spoke about the diapers. Not the object, but what they represented. The moment when she realized love didn't protect her child from scarcity. Tears slid down her face, and she didn't rush to wipe them away. For once, she didn't apologize for needing help. The man felt the weight of her words settle deep in his chest. This wasn't charity in the abstract. This was consequence. He saw how close she lived to the edge, how one small disruption could collapse everything. In that moment, the distance between their worlds felt obscene. He knew then that whatever he did next would define him far more than any deal he'd ever closed. He explained what he could offer: temporary support, childcare assistance, access to resources she'd never known how to reach. No promises of miracles, no guarantees of forever. Just stability, space to breathe, time to stand back up. He emphasized that she could walk away at any point. She listened, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Trust didn't come easily, but neither did opportunities like this. When she finally nodded, it wasn't relief that washed over her, it was exhaustion giving way to cautious belief. For the first time, someone wasn't asking her to prove she deserved help. They parted quietly, with no handshake, no dramatic farewell. Outside, she stood for a moment, letting the city noise rush back in. Nothing looked different, but everything felt altered, like the ground beneath her had subtly shifted. Later that evening, the investor received a message from someone on his team. A brief note, unintended and careless, referencing the grocery store incident and potential optics. He stared at the screen, realizing too late that the moment he thought was private might already be slipping beyond his control. Somewhere online, a fragment of a story was about to surface, and once it did, neither compassion nor intention would be enough to stop what came next. The first sign that something had gone wrong appeared on her phone before breakfast. A message from a friend she hadn't spoken to in years popped up with a single question: "Is this you?" Beneath it was a blurry screenshot of a post she had never seen before. The image showed the supermarket aisle, grainy and cropped, but unmistakable. Her back was turned, the stroller visible, the shelf of diapers in front of her. The caption was already spreading, framed with outrage and praise in equal measure. She felt her stomach drop as she scrolled, realizing her quiet moment had become public property. Comments poured in faster than she could read them. Some were kind, many were cruel. Strangers debated her worth, her choices, her right to have a child at all. She shut the app, hands shaking, a familiar shame clawing its way back. The help she had accepted now felt fragile, exposed to the judgment of millions. Across town, the investor watched the same post explode across multiple platforms. What had started as an internal discussion about optics had leaked through a careless share, then snowballed beyond containment. Influencers speculated. Headlines formed. His name surfaced, then surged. His team urged him to release a statement immediately, control the narrative, clarify intentions, protect the brand. He listened in silence, eyes fixed on the screen where strangers argued over a story they barely understood. For the first time in his career, reputation management felt hollow. She called him, panic breaking through her voice. She hadn't agreed to this. She hadn't wanted attention. She was afraid of losing privacy, of being judged, of the help disappearing as quickly as it came. He listened, guilt pressing heavily on his chest, knowing that despite his intentions, he had failed to protect her. The fourth paragraph of every article, every post, twisted the moment into something simpler than it was. A rich man saves a poor mother. A feel-good story. Easy to like, easy to share. But stripped of its complexity, it felt false, and dangerous. That afternoon, he made a decision that shocked his advisors. He refused to issue a polished press release. No sponsorships. No branded charity posts. Instead, he drafted a single message in his own words, one that centered her dignity rather than his generosity. When the post went live, it was quiet, restrained, and deeply human. He spoke about seeing someone return diapers to a shelf and realizing how broken a system must be for that to happen. He asked people to stop speculating about her life, to stop sharing her image, and to focus instead on the reality faced by millions of families. The response was immediate and explosive. The tone online began to shift. Anger redirected. Conversations deepened. What could have remained a fleeting viral clip transformed into a wider reckoning. That night, she held her baby close, scrolling through messages of support mixed with noise. For the first time since the post appeared, she felt something steadier than fear. The story was no longer just about her, and whatever came next would change both their lives forever. In the weeks that followed, the noise slowly faded, replaced by something quieter and more enduring. The video stopped circulating, her image gradually disappeared from timelines, and the internet moved on to its next outrage. But her life did not return to what it had been, and for the first time, that was a good thing. With the support she received, she secured stable childcare, finished a training program she had once abandoned, and stepped into a job that didn't require her to choose between dignity and survival. The diapers were never mentioned again between them, yet their meaning lingered as a reminder of how close everything had been to unraveling. For the investor, the moment became a line he could never uncross. He redirected resources away from performative charity and toward quiet, systemic support, insisting on anonymity for those helped and accountability for those in power. He never claimed credit for what happened, and that restraint became the very reason his decision resonated so deeply. As for her, she learned that accepting help did not erase her strength, it revealed it. On a morning not unlike the one that started it all, she stood in a different aisle, placed diapers into her cart without hesitation, and walked out of the store with her head high and her child secure. The world hadn't magically fixed itself, but one choice had shifted its balance, enough to remind millions watching that compassion, when practiced with humility, can still change the story.